Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on which time zone you're following us from. My name is Pierantonios Papazoglou. I'm the Research and Strategy Manager at CERIDES, at the Center of Excellence for Risk and Decision Sciences at the European University Cyprus. And I would like to welcome you all at this kickoff of our Disaster Prevention Month 2021. Your Excellency, Professor George Boustras, I would like to start this Disaster Prevention Month 2021 with our very first day dedicated at the regional collaboration in disaster prevention. And we have the honor and privilege today to present the cases of Israel and Cyprus. Now, without further ado, I would like to invite to the e-podium, if you will, Professor George Boustras, who is the director of our Center of Excellence in Risk and Decision Sciences. So, Professor Boustras, the e-floor is over to you.
Thank you very much, Pierantonios, and good afternoon to all our friends here in Cyprus and in Israel. And given the circumstances, we hope that we're going to have a meeting that is going to flow in the best possible way. Let me make sure that I mute my, let me make sure that I mute my microphone, because you see, I said that I was hoping for a smooth transition, but I made sure that I didn't. But anyway, that is not a problem. I very much look forward to a successful month. We embark on this month on the CERIDES Prevention Month, Disaster Prevention Month. Why? Because we want to raise awareness. We want to raise awareness because summer 2021 was a very bad summer. That's what people that we are working on risk assessment and various other issues are always saying, but unfortunately this was the year that things didn't go right. They didn't go right in Cyprus, they didn't go right in Israel, in France, in Turkey, in Greece, in Spain. They didn't go out not because we were incompetent, but they didn't go out because of climate crisis. Unfortunately, the onset of climate crisis, the events and the impacts of climate crisis are happening much faster than we were imagining. And we decided, as we do every year, to go ahead and try to raise awareness. As the majority of you know, our annual event, which from now on is going to be a biannual event, is the Nicosia Risk Forum, which this year did not happen because it is going to be a biannual event, much bigger. Already last year it was very big, but we plan it to be even bigger. So we look forward to organizing it in November 22. So there will be an opportunity. But we didn't want to miss the chance, and we wanted to do a number of things. First of all, as I said, to raise awareness. Secondly, it is very important for us as a laboratory to keep close to our roots, and our roots and our policy has to do with regional collaboration in our area, the area of Southeast Mediterranean, an area that has a number of problems, but has a number of opportunities as well. And although disasters are not opportunities, fighting disasters, managing disasters, preventing disasters can be an opportunity for a positive agenda in our area, because civil protection grows from solidarity. So along these lines, we decided to have this month We started today with our closest friends, our good friends from the University of Haifa and from Mukhanut, the National Research Center for Emergency Management. I'm sure that later on my friend Professor Deborah Smell is gonna correct me that I didn't say the words in the right order, but I did my best. And we continue tomorrow. We have plans for the week after. As the time goes and given the current situation, our plans are evolving. So I ask you to please follow our Twitter, Facebook accounts in order to keep up to date. Last thing. I wouldn't, it is as if we planned it. We have been very, very lucky to hold today's meeting on the day that the tripartite is happening in Jerusalem. A tripartite that, according to the press and from what we see, it is touching upon the very issues that we are promoting this month, because I see from the agenda that was published that there is reference to civil protection and emergency management. What a great issue, unfortunately, as well as on climate crisis. So, although I'm not the type of person that I'm gonna brag about what we do, I think our event today comes in a very timely manner. And without further ado, I would like to pass the floor to a great friend of Cyprus, a great friend of our university, a generous lady that I consider as a friend as well, the Deputy Ambassador of the Embassy of the State of Israel in the Republic of Cyprus here in Nicosia, Ms. Noga Kaspi.
Welcome, Your Excellency. Please.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation to make some opening remarks today in this important event. It is my honor to represent the Embassy of Israel in Cyprus, the European University CERIDES and Director Professor George Busras are close associates with the embassy for many years. I wish to thank them not only for being good partners for us in the embassy, but also for taking such nice initiatives. I failed as the startup nation. Okay, so I will start again. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the invitation to give some opening remarks in this important event today. It's a great honor for me to represent the Embassy of Israel in Cyprus. The European University, CERIDES, and its director, Professor George Busras, are very close associates with the Embassy of Israel, and I wish to thank them not only for being good partners during the years, but also for taking important and productive initiatives like this month, starting with collaboration with Israel, with the University of Haifa, the National Knowledge and Research Center for Emergency Readiness, known as well as the Mukhanut Center, with Professor Deborah Shmueli, which I had the honor to meet here also in the past in previous event. As Professor Busras, my dear friend George, mentioned, I'm sure you're all aware that we're having the Trilateral Summit today in Jerusalem with the participants of the President Nikos Anastasiadis, Prime Minister Mitsotakis, hosting by Prime Minister Bennett. And just an hour ago, the leaders gave their statements. All of them refer to the importance of the collaboration in the field of emergency preparedness and climate change, all the topics that are very much relevant to the web talk we're having today. Due to the summit, unfortunately the ambassador could not attend today, and also myself will not be able to stay all the day long. But when I went through the agenda, it seems to me a fascinating day that I'm sure is relevant not only for us as diplomats, but also to the wider public and of course all the academia world. Such summits that are taking place with our trilateral leaders and the relevant ministers, as well as the events that the European University and the other academia are hosting, are only indicators for, or indicators, not only indicators for the excellent relations that we are enjoying and the willingness to cooperate in various fields, including disaster prevention. Both our countries are very much affected from the climate change, from the wildfire we witnessed in the last summer, and also the wider area and the regional cooperation that Professor Bustos mentioned is very important. Also, we as an embassy, we intend to put on our agenda for 2022 to support institutionalization of the collaboration in this field, and also to support afforestation and tree planting in Cyprus. There is an urgent need to tackle climate change and the side effects, and Israel is trying to do so with what it is known best, innovation, whatever relates to climate innovation and emergency responses technologies. Israel, known in its state-of-the-art technologies, we are willing to share them, to share knowledge, to share technologies with the other countries, of course with Cyprus as well. And the geographical proximity, as well as the excellent relations, is the key for a success and a win-win situation with this regard. Israel, it is worth mentioning, also supports the climate change initiative of Cyprus in the governmental level, and also the participation of experts and scientists. The assistance that each country has given to another during the recent years in the firefighting shows this is feasible and is an example to follow other disasters that we truly wish will not happen, but we must be ready for. So I would like to conclude by saying that sharing best practices and lesson learned will surely benefit us all, and to wish you a productive web talk today within the Disaster Prevention Month. Thank you very much.
Your Excellency, Madam Deputy Ambassador, we sincerely thank you for your presence here today. In fact, we feel honored, especially for this very particular day where diplomatically and politically there's a lot happening. We feel privileged that you're here today representing the State of Israel. We are indeed honored, as I said, and we are privileged. It is true that at country level, our ties are very important. But also at the institutional level, and we thank you very much for mentioning here from this podium the attempt to institutionalize this collaboration. We have, allow me, sweat and bled together in Israel during the disastrous forest fires, but also Israel has assisted us here on our own ground in relevant disastrous events. So institutionalizing this collaboration is, of course, for us very important. And we as CERIDES and as European University Cyprus, we are also very happy and very privileged to contribute to this collaboration as well. So with your permission, Madam Deputy Ambassador, and with the permission of Professor Boustras, I would like to now invite to the electronic podium a very good collaborator of ours, Professor Deborah Shmueli. I hope I have pronounced the name well, from the University of Haifa, from Mukhanut, from the National Knowledge and Research Center for Emergency Readiness. Professor Shmueli will present to us a brief introduction to the National Knowledge and Research Center for Emergency Readiness. Professor Shmueli, please, the electronic podium and floor is yours.
Okay, I think I'm on. Is that correct?
Yes, you are, indeed.
Okay. Well, first of all, thanks so much, Deputy Ambassador George, and the whole team for initiating this day. Let me try to, hold on. Okay. Really, it's a pleasure to be here, although I wish that we were in Cyprus in person. And I look forward to deepening our collaboration in the field of emergency management. I'll say a few short words about the center before we get started. So the National Knowledge and Research Center for Emergency Readiness was established in 2018 in January by the Ministry of Science and Technology and the National Emergency Management Administration. It's an institution for research, training, education, and publication, which serves as a national resource and facilitates transnational collaboration and comparative research. And that's where we really want to deepen the collaboration between our two countries and our institutes. The center research is directed according to both national needs as defined by NEMA, the National Security Administration, the Ministry of Science and Technology, other governmental ministries, NGOs, localities, some Knesset members, and by researchers' initiatives as directed by the Center's steering and scientific committees, and in response to the Center's needs assessments and internal calls for research proposals. The three core institutions forming the Center Hub are the University of Haifa, the Technion, and the Hebrew University, along with researchers from Rafael Advanced Defense Systems, Rambam Hospital, Tel Hai College, the School of Humanitarian Aid, Natan, an NGO for international humanitarian aid in the Haifa municipality, are also integral team members, and they help to develop needs assessments, research agendas, and they serve as beta sites for some of our research projects. We're approximately 90 researchers, some are more active than others, as well as numerous research associates and affiliates. I'll give you a brief overview of how the center is structured. It's basically structured conceptually along two axes: the nature of the extreme condition and the time period before, during, or after a crisis. So the three clusters of extreme conditions which are relevant are man and nature, the natural and man-made disasters, fires, earthquakes, epidemics, floods, environmental, nuclear, cyber, belligerencies, wars, terrorism, armed conflicts, cyber attacks, and socioeconomic crises, a number of them spurred by COVID in the last year and a half. So these extreme events are situated temporally before, and then we're talking about detection, mitigation, preparation for response, during response itself, and after short and long-term recovery. So coping with a disaster in each of the time frames is approached through the multidisciplines and their research frames. So you can see here that there are 8 disciplinary research groups. Many of them are pretty multidisciplinary in themselves. We have engineering, technology and planning, social science, social work and welfare, public health and emergency medicine, risk assessment, environment, and law and public policy. The law and public policy groups also have a centralized function, and translate the research outcomes to practice. They receive the research outputs from all projects, assess their implications for law and public policy, and make recommendations. So this kind of provides a built-in operational pipeline aspect to the research. The real strength of the center is our focus on multidisciplinary research. Almost all of the projects are multidisciplinary. The main activities, basically the first 6 months of the center was devoted to a mapping of research and knowledge gaps in various relevant areas. According to the mapping results, research projects have been funded. Most of them are either 2 or 3 year projects. All research includes solicitation of the perspectives of relevant stakeholders, practitioners of state agencies in charge of responding to emergencies, like governmental ministries, independent agencies established for addressing a particular type of crisis, local government, first responders, general security and enforcement agencies, relief providing agencies and NGOs, relevant medical institutions, and the insurance industry. All the research findings are published on our website and provided to the relevant decision makers and stakeholders. The center also holds workshops, international conferences. We offer condensed courses open to the public. We have some capacity to provide quick response to ad hoc small research questions from stakeholders. During COVID, we were quite stretched, and we found ourselves providing information and short-term research findings. As I mentioned earlier, the center is comprised of about 90 researchers with expertise in a variety of emergency areas. And the researchers are able to characterize issues that need to be addressed in the National Security Council and other entities, as well as to answer questions from these entities and other think tanks. For example, we were requested to provide a set of metrics for lockdown exit strategies. We submitted a list of about 26 possible metrics according to which policy could be directed or monitored for its consequences. I can't say that our recommendations were implemented in any sort of a timely fashion, as most of the decisions were politically and not scientifically driven. Another example is that the center served as an integrating body for the Ministry of Science, which funded about 70 studies on the variety of topics addressing short and longer term aspects of the corona crisis. In order to streamline in real time the gathering of insights from these studies, some of them done by researchers in the center and many others outside the center provided the ministry and decision makers with a bi-weekly summary, which included interesting statistics and findings that emerged during the research, findings that seemed surprising or contradictory to accepted beliefs, key insights and action suggestions that had crystallized up to the point of time of the report. It was such a dynamic time that you really couldn't wait till the end of a research project, which is what we're used to. The center's website is both in Hebrew and English. It includes links to data sites, articles, research, and recent events, as well as articles and videos of center's staff. In addition, the center library on the site's continually being updated and expanded with new scientific articles. We invite you to visit, at least until you can visit us in person. And I'll stop here so that we can move on to the main focus of today's workshop. And thank you, George, and the whole team for this wonderful initiative. Okay.
So Professor Shmueli, thank you very, very much for your presentation. We indeed enjoy to learn and to take examples from Mukhanut, from the National Knowledge and Research Center for Emergency Readiness. We do aspire that at some point as Cyprus we will be able to institutionalize as well and to establish a relevant center like that.
Well, we have a lot to learn from you as well.
Thank you. Knowledge sharing then and knowledge exchange. So thanking Professor Shmueli very much, we move on to our agenda. And in fact, we now have our own Mr. Iasonas Senekis from the European University Cyprus and from CERIDES, who will present to us the Arakapas fire, the recent Arakapas fire, and the Fire EU Risk Project. Mr. Senekis, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Pierantonio. So let us share the presentation. Great. So we would like to share some information regarding the Arakapas fires that happened in the summer of 2021 in Cyprus, and we will also share with you some information regarding the Fire EU Risk Project that CERIDES participates. The European University, through CERIDES, is participating in this European-funded project regarding wildfires and the preparation, so from the lessons learned for the future wildfires. Let's start with the Arakapas fires. The fire happened in July 2021. On the 3rd of July, it was a Saturday afternoon. Couple of photos just to get the size and the unfortunate results of the fire. You can see the difference between the two photos and what has happened after the fire occurred. Some photos from the location at the time of the fires, and some other photos from the fire service in Cyprus, which show the extent of the fire and how it occurred. Some characteristics of the fire. It happened on the 3rd of July. It was a Saturday afternoon. Previously, before the fire and the previous week, we had the continuous heat wave conditions with temperatures over 40 degrees Celsius, and this was the case also on the specific day. The unfortunate events resulted to 4 fatalities. The affected area was 55 square kilometers according to the local authorities, and the burned area, according to Copernicus, reached 3,143 hectares in less than 24 hours. The cause of the fire was, according to local authorities, and the investigation so far, was a 67-year-old farmer who was burning dead vegetation in his property. Cyprus activated the rescue mechanism on the same day, later that afternoon, and Greece sent firefighting planes, and Italy, and also Israel also participated in the fire fighting with some airplanes. The Great Britain also assisted through their military bases in the island. The fire was controlled in less than 24 hours. Here are some photos from the planes that arrived from Greece and Israel, who responded immediately, and of course, the local authorities and the government also helped and thanked both of the countries, and the announcement of the deployment of the EU the rescue mechanism. This is a picture of the fire, the affected area. It was directly affected 7 villages communities. It started from the Arakapas area and it moved to the rest of the communities. It was a total of 55 square kilometers that was affected, and the burned area, as said before, was at 3,000, more than 3,000 hectares. Unfortunately, due to the events, 4 people lost their lives in their efforts to escape the fire. A lot of destruction was to the forest plantation. You can see the photos. And a lot of houses and businesses were destroyed or affected in the village center, and more in the perimeter and out of the settlement's core, due to the efforts of the local services, who actually protected the cores of the villages. Also, the networks, the road network, the water and the electricity networks were also damaged. This is a photo from the fire station in Catalonia village, which was burned, which was destroyed by the fire. Unfortunately, at the moment of the fire, the firefighters were at a different location, were at a different event, trying to put out another fire in Limassol, and the fire station, unfortunately, was not defensed, was not protected. We can see here the impacts of the fire on the local agricultural fields. A lot of olive trees were burned and a lot of orange trees that were used for production of oranges. Domestic and wild animals and birds. A chicken farm was affected. It was not burned. It was not affected directly by the fire, but all the chickens in the farm died due to the heat and the smoke inhalation. The fast speed of the fire and the fire spread, you can see it started from the circle near the Aracabas village and then was moved and spread to the rest of the area, to the rest of the locations. And we go to the emergency services respond. In Cyprus, there are different services responding to fires. The forest department is dealing with forest areas. The fire service is dealing with rural areas. The civil protection is taking over the evacuation and assisting the extinguishing operations. And of course, the police and ambulances are also supporting the rest of the services. There was a mobile coordination center that was established in a restaurant nearby. And there was a lot of movement and help by the volunteers. Some of them were trained and some of them were not trained. But all of them were coordinated in a way by the mobile center in the non-affected village. This is an issue that we came to the conclusion, and we saw it in the past, that unfortunately non-trained volunteers and non-coordinated volunteers are responding to some events, and this is an issue that should be a lesson learned, and the coordination and the training of the volunteers must be touched upon in the future. The challenges of the emergency management during the fire. At the time that the fire broke out in Aracabas, there were simultaneous fires in Nicosia and Limassol districts. So the fire appliance in the Heptagonia village was in a fire in Limassol at the time of the incident. So this caused delay in the response of the appliance to the local fire. Response was dispatched from the Nicosia fire service, but due to the blockage of the roads from the fires and the other vehicles that were on the road, the response was delayed. We have tried to put as many photos as possible so you can understand the extent of the fire and how it affected the area. So a lesson learned, and some things that need to be addressed is that there should be an increase in fire personnel of stations and fire appliances in the area. And of course, this needs a budget to be assigned in order to be achieved. Another challenge was the coordination between the authorities. The mobile coordination center was set up in a van, and unfortunately the communication technology was basic. So after the fire, there is a political decision to update this response center, the emergency response center, and update the system and create a holistic system for dealing with these agriculture and forest fires with new technologies. Just an array of lessons learned. As we discussed before, as I said before, the increase of firefighting personnel, the coordination. We need to find a way to change the way we're dealing fire in order to learn some lessons and see it in a holistic and systemic way. Law enforcement, in order to start to stop people putting fires in their properties, and of course cleaning their properties whenever they're responsible, and engage people as much as possible, train and organize the volunteers, give them equipment, give them the relevant training and coordination, and many more. So these are very recent photos. It was a visit we did through the Rescue project and the PyroLife project. Some researchers we went to the location in order to conduct some interviews and take some photos. As you can see, local residents are rebuilding their homes, their houses. This is a photo from a house not in the core of the village. It's outside the village that now the owner is rebuilding. You can see the nature is now coming green again. These are some activities that were organized by volunteers. They're trying to put some color into the black environment of the area. So let me move on to the Fire EU Risk project. Fire EU Risk project is a Horizon 2020 project. It's funded by the European Union. Let me start with a short video of the project so that you get some general information and then we can analyze it.
Wildfires are increasingly threatening the environment and societies. They can lead to ecological and economic damage and loss of lives. Due to climate and land use changes, their extent and severity are increasing, posing great challenges in Europe and worldwide. The risk of a wildfire occurring depends on weather and fuel availability, human drivers like accidents and arson, but also on socio-economic aspects, such as land use and fire management strategies. To enable effective wildfire management, an integrated approach is necessary. Before a fire, improving fire risk assessment facilitates reducing negative fire impacts. Fire suppression must be carried out considering its full environmental and societal effect. Recovery actions should produce more fire-resilient landscapes and communities. The European project Fire EU Risk addresses these needs by fully integrating physical, socio-economic and political contexts into existing protocols. Its aim is to deliver a coordinated and science-based strategy for European wildfire management. It brings together 38 partners from all fire-related sectors, from researchers to first responders and authorities. Supported by citizen scientists, they provide the knowledge necessary to co-design effective solutions. To assess wildfire risk, it will use innovative methods for estimating and communicating fire danger and vulnerability. These include satellite and airborne sensors, geospatial analysis, meteorological and socio-economic modeling. To reduce fire risk, land management strategies will be evaluated to better manage fuel, and a new, near real-time tool for predicting fire behavior will be produced for decision makers, from first responders to evacuation planners. To enable adapting to future risk, high-resolution climate scenarios will be complemented by demographic and socio-economic projections, as well as environmental policies. The resulting strategies will be implemented as pilot sites and demonstration areas across Europe, and all findings showcased via open access, providing valuable knowledge and tools for every stakeholder. With their work, Fire EU Risk partners aim to improve current wildfire approaches by providing updated fire science and management strategies towards a more resilient future for Europe and elsewhere.
So, back to the presentation. As you saw, the Fire EU Risk project has 38 partners from 18 countries, from Europe, America, and Oceania, Australia. It's going to be a 4-year-long project from 2021 to 2025, and its funding is at 10 million euros. The consortium includes 21 research institutions, 12 operation agencies, 5 enterprises, and of course it is interdisciplinary because a lot of experts, scientists, and other expertise are working together. Mechanical engineers, forest engineers, social scientists, ecologists, geographers, climatologists, etc. This is all of the parts of the partners of the consortium and the map from the countries that they come from. And the objectives of the project is to develop, test, and disseminate an integrated science-based strategy for wildfire risk management in Europe. So In order to achieve that, we want to expand the capabilities of the existing wildfire risk assessment systems, use risk assessment to drive wildfire management and reduce current fire risk conditions, and adapt fire management strategies to expected future climate and socio-economical changes. And this is happening through close collaboration between the researchers, practitioners, policymakers, and citizens. Shifting towards managing the risk, this is how the project is planning to achieve its goals through its structure. This is the structure of the project. It's fire risk centered, it's science-based, it's integrated strategy, a holistic approach for extreme events, and we are looking for new fire-prone areas. This is a leaflet of the project with all the information gathered. I'm just going to analyze now the three main targets of the project. Is the wildfire risk assessment. We are improving preparedness for extreme fires. So assessing the risk conditions and potential vulnerability and impact of specific areas. We include social and ecological aspects of risks, the holistic approach we said before, and focus to managing the fire risk conditions in the areas at risk. Wildfire risk reduction, we need to tackle the societal factors of fire risk, capitalize the experience from previous extreme events, and an analysis of the events of 2021 throughout Europe and around the world is currently taking place, and we are expecting to have this analysis completed in the next weeks and to be presented. We recently had a webinar last week regarding the fires in the Mediterranean basin, where Cyprus was also presented. The Cyprus fire was presented along with fires from Italy, France, and Spain. The third target is the wildfire risk adaptation, where we need to anticipate the future conditions. We need to generate and elaborate the fire regime scenarios linked to the changes due to the future climate conditions and support the adaptation plans in new fire-prone regions through integration of the risk change drivers into future scenarios. The three goals, they need to be integrated and they need to be communicated to the end users, to the citizens, to the scientists through an open source channel so that it's available for everyone. The results are going to be tested in realistic scenarios. We have 26 demonstration areas in the project. You can see them in the map here. We have 5 pilot sites: Portugal, Greece, Spain, Germany, and Sweden. And this is an EU scale project, a projection of fire regime and wildfire risk for the years to come. This is a video of our website. You can visit it. It's fireeurisk.com. We're just going through the website. You can see the information. All is available in a very user-friendly environment, and you can also find our news, the upcoming webinars, and the resources and the results that are going to be published from the project. These are the social media accounts where you can contact us. In the YouTube channel, you can find the latest webinar, recording of the latest webinars, and the video we showed before. And that's all from us, from CERIDES. Thank you very much for your attention.
So thank you, Mr. Senekis. Thank you, Iasonas. Before I move ahead to invite another pair of good collaborators from EUC and CERIDES, I have been kindly reminded that science communication is very important. So Her Excellency, the Deputy Ambassador, Mrs. Kaspi, and Professor Boustras have set the tone. So, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, also please tweet, retweet, post, repost on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, both for the social media of the projects that are showcased today, but of course also our own hashtag of hashtag DPM 2021 for our Disaster Prevention Month. So without further ado, I would like to invite again to the electronic podium two very good colleagues here at CERIDES, Ms. Pooja Bandey and Ms. Judith Kirchner, who will present to us PyroLife, a Marie Skłodowska-Curie training network project. In fact, the Fire Marie Curie Training Network project. So Pooja and Judith, please, the electronic floor is yours.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you very much for your great presentations. We are grateful to be a part of such a platform to discuss and share the knowledge we have gained so far. My name is Pooja Pandey, and with me is my colleague Judith Kirchner. We are associated with PyroLife Network and are PhD candidates at CERIDES at University Cyprus. We are here today to present our projects and take you through a brief introduction of PyroLife and some of the best practices for wildfire risk management. As the month is dedicated to disaster prevention, you can see a small illustration on the right. Here, it basically shows the one who is trying to prevent the fire from the beginning is not appreciated. However, the one who just waits and looks at the fire is treated as a hero once he, suppresses the big fire. And to be honest, this has been the approach for centuries that we need to change. And fortunately, we are learning. We are learning now because it costs 7 times more for the response than to be prepared in advance. Anyway, moving on. Next slide, please. Okay, so PyroLife is a project funded by the European Commission as a so-called innovative training network, which means it trains 15 early stage researchers like Judith and myself in innovative and creative thinking. And this way we get an opportunity to work on different projects to find solutions to move from wildfire resistance to wildfire resilience. PyroLife itself is a big network and has several educational institutions and organizations spread over Europe, USA, New Zealand, and which also includes big names like the European Forest Institute, National Forest Protection Agency, and New Zealand Forest Research Institute, and also many more like these. And also with its wide range network, it also covers a wide range of disciplines and also the sectors to help face key wildfire threats and to ensure feasibility in covering most of these disciplines. As I mentioned earlier, PyroLife supports 15 PhD candidates across the globe to pursue cross-disciplinary wildfire-focused projects by explicitly involving interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary aspects in each project with the help of 3 work packages, rather than just concentrating the whole dimension to environmental and social science disciplines in separate work packages. So we have 3 work packages where work package 1 aims to quantify the risk by assessing the fire risk awareness and fire danger and fire behavior and fire impact on water and economies. Whereas work package 2 aims to reduce fire risk and vulnerability, which can be done at multiple scales, and it will be achieved by creating the first European-wide Firewise guidelines. And this work package approaches fire resilient landscape design, fire prevention, and fire resilient governance, which is also Judith's project, and she'll be talking about it in a minute. However, the true implementation of living with fire, it requires exchange, it requires engagement, it requires communication. And this is what the work package 3 focuses on, which is the management of risks by stimulating resilience and preparedness through developing a transdisciplinary approach for fire research by aligning interagency exchange, which is my project, and engaging vulnerable communities at risk and communicating these risks to the communities. Next slide, please. Okay, so here Judith and I will be discussing our research areas within the PyroLife project. And I am researching as early stage researcher 13 about European interagency exchange. And if we talk about wildfires in general and their management, unlike the other natural hazards, wildfire is considered as an unavoidable risk, and human can both trigger and stop the fire disasters. However, with the expansion of societies, it is most important for the response of a hazard, to evolve as well with the evolving society. And for this, we need stronger collaboration within and also between emergency response agencies. But unfortunately, this collaboration is difficult, not just because of the intricacy of the hazard, but also due to the agencies and diverse composition of people involved in it. And this is actually where my research starts, because the primary goal of my project is to analyze and understand the operational ways to promote European interagency exchange in the emergency management. And my project basically involves around analyzing the barriers for European collaboration. And these barriers could be like due to several factors, like poor communication, lack of proper planning, or maybe not using the right tools, and many more. Like I have a list of it. And for this reason, I am looking at the multi-level approach to study emergency management by the countries and public sector governance system. And with the completion of the project, it would be helpful in strengthening the preparedness approach through interagency streamlining. And also my project and Judith's project are interrelated in a way. So I'll stop here now and I will pass it over to Judith to talk about her project. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Pooja. So I am working on the topic of wildfire governance. And wildfire governance, in my case, refers to all the rules and the organizational processes through which decisions are taken around wildfires. So this can be on a very local community level or all the way up, sorry, on a national scale, or even like in between of countries, like, for example, as we see in the RESC-EU civil protection mechanism. And so governance is all about who gets to take decisions, who might be represented in those processes or not, what are the benefits for who, and who is responsible in the end. And governance always has a formal and an informal component. So formal governance refers on policies, on legislation, on strategies, like basically everything we have somehow officially written down on paper. While informal governance is all about things like risk culture and attitudes or values. So, for example, if we consider wildfires as monsters or the enemy, and also if we drop the whole responsibility connected to fire risk only on the rescue services and the authorities, or if individual people actually do take responsibility. And so the goal of my PhD is to find out about the current status of wildfire governance, then to visit the wider fields of natural resources and disaster risk governance, and from there to see what could be useful also in a context of wildfires. Okay, so now we will move on to a few examples of best practice in fire risk prevention. But I'll just now take a very quick moment and speak about the role of fire for this planet, because like we really need to know what we're actually dealing with and like what it means. So fire is around on the planet for a very, very long time. So basically, since there is terrestrial life on continents, the record shows that it is burning. And so that is for hundreds of million years already. Now, we can also zoom into a very recent period of Earth history, the time of hominin evolution. And again, this is very closely connected to the use of fire, like for cooking, for hunting, in agriculture, and so forth. So fire has always been around in one way or another, and many ecosystems are adapted to it, or even depend on a specific fire regime. And with fire regime, we mean the frequency in which a fire occurs, maybe once a year or even more often or every few decades. then how hot the fire burns and how much biomass is consumed. Like, is it like a ground fire or a crown fire, like going into all the tree? And yeah, you can basically imagine the similars with water. Like, plants or ecosystems are not just adapted to water, but to a specific amount of water throughout time or throughout the year. Now, what you see here on the slide are fire ignitions detected by the NASA satellites from space over the past 2 or 3 weeks. And I think it shows really nicely that fire is really everywhere. Like, of course, now this doesn't tell if these fires are wanted or not. We don't know their cause. We can't see if they're maybe stronger for climate change and what is the resulting risk that they pose to human life or infrastructure. But so that, of course, is like basically our work to find out and define. And so the key message here is like, there will be fire on this planet in one form or another. Like, even if you control ignitions, there might be an accident on the highway, like a car burning and the fire spreading with wind. So as Pooja has mentioned earlier, like, the whole idea behind PyroLife is to move our management approach from fire resistance to fire resilience, or in different words, we want to have a fire of choice rather than a fire of chance. And so with this background on understanding fire as a key ecosystem process, we've now looked up some really nice examples of fire risk prevention from different countries. And Pooja will start with an example from the US. Over to you.
Thanks, Judith. Really interesting to know. And thanks for also explaining the fire regimes. And now, because I mentioned earlier, it's an emergency prevention discussion, we thought of including some of the best practices we came across during our research. Of course, it was not possible to include all of them, but we have included some of them which can be adopted in our own countries. So first up is from the US, and for a fact, we know that forest management and fire policies exist within the cultural, social, economic, and political context. And hence, these national policies should aim to protect both plant and animal kingdom. And this is what the national policy in US does. It aims to protect the forest resources and prevent the destruction of lives and property. Basically, it aims to protect the private properties in proximity to the national forest. But in order to bring these practices and theories together, it is important to understand how communication practices are related to these new approaches in emergency management. Next slide, Judith, please. Moving on, if we talk about the Firewise USA, it is a program started in the early 2000s, which is administered by the National Forest Protection Agency and is co-sponsored by the United States Department of Agriculture, Forest Services, and the National Association of State Foresters. This program provides a collaborative framework to help neighbors in a geographic area to get organized and take action to increase the ignition resistance of their home and community, and to reduce wildfire risk at the local level. And on the right, you can see this is a map showing the areas covered by the Firewise program, which is almost covering the entire continent. Next slide, please. So basically, the techniques in Firewise includes minimizing the risk of home ignition by carefully landscaping around residential structures, such as thinning trees and brushes and choosing fire-resistant plants and selecting ignition-resistant building materials and positioning structures away from the slopes. For example, in June of 2018, the Firewise USA site Falls Creek in Durango, which is in Colorado, was put to test, and the 416 wildfire threatened the community. But because of the work residents had done earlier to prepare their homes, firefighters were able to protect homes within that community. And also, if you're interested, I can attach a link in the chat of the response of the first responders to this approach, the Firewise program, and you can watch it whenever you have time and if you're interested. Next slide, please. Okay, so as we know, EU is also expanding its horizon to deal with the wildfire issues. And thus we include the best practices in wildfire risk prevention from Catalonia, which is in the northeast part of Spain. And the main goal here is to create a fire resilient landscape by treating the fuel properly and efficiently, which includes prescribed burning, thinning trees and brushes, and diversification of vegetation by planting new species. Also, the second goal is to restore the cultural fire regimes, which are achieved by preventing undesired human ignition and introducing natural fire management and regulating the traditional use of fires in rural areas. The third goal is to support a safe and efficient fire response, which focuses on the suppression efforts in protecting the defensible property. Finally, last but not the least, is to generate fire adapted communities, human communities, with the help of promoting community action program. However, next slide, please. So the Catalan services place the focus on resilient landscape. Next slide, please. And building community awareness. Because at the moment, increasing fuel connectivity and buildup are the main contributing factors to large wildfires. And hence, managing fuels on fire-prone landscape represents the most promising strategy, which is capable of reversing the escalation of mega fires and restoring the fire-resilient ecosystem. And this is what exactly we need at this time, at least the first step to move forward. And with this, I will stop here and pass it over to Judith again for the further discussion and conclusions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pooja. Really inspiring examples, I think. So I have now one more last example for today, which is from Portugal. So drivers behind wildfire risk in Portugal are quite similar like in the rest of the Mediterranean. There is a high percentage of unmanaged lands because people move from rural to like urban areas. There's an increasing amount of fuels, both in terms of amount, connectivity, but also extent. So that's basically the vegetation growing after people don't use those lands anymore. And there's a high number of unwanted fire ignitions. Plus, then climate change leads to more and longer periods of fire weather. So that leads to longer and more severe fire seasons. And so Portugal had a really tragic and severe fire season in 2017 with a record of more than 500,000 hectares burned and also sadly more than 120 human lives lost. And so you can only imagine like the massive impact of those fires also on economy and environment. However, there have been consequences in the politics and management approaches. So now there's the DHIF, which is a public body for integrated rural fire management under the supervision and oversight of the Portuguese Prime Minister. And the DHIF has proposed the National Integrated Rural Fire Management Plan. So that is a 10-year plan approved by the Congress to achieve the vision of protecting Portugal from severe rural fires. And so this plan provides information and supports decisions through strategic guidelines and goals to reduce the wildfire exposure for people and for properties. And it also proposes risk assessment and landscape scenario planning for fuel management. And finally, it acknowledges the role of fires for ecosystems and considers the use of fire as a landscape management tool. So in concrete terms, there is more than 97 projects now where both private and public stakeholders are involved on a regional and on a sub-regional level. For example, on fuel treatment mosaics, working on fuel treatment mosaics or fuel break networks. So with this, we want to close our presentation on wildfire risk prevention here at the CERIDES Disaster Prevention Month. So we have presented the PyroLife project and our individual research, and we briefly spoke about the role of fire in the Earth system. And this leads us to our first take-home message, which is aim at fire resilience rather than fire resistance. Like many ecosystems are adapted to a specific fire regime, there will always be ignitions, and the landscape flammability will only increase with warmer climate. So this summer, there was a really large wildfire in Cyprus, and this can absolutely happen again. So therefore, what we highlight here is that we need to assess and manage the fire risk at different places and for different people, and then come up with a plan and strategies to reduce that risk before we get the fire. And that can happen in different forms and on different levels. So it can be initiatives on a home scale, like what we've presented with the Firewise program from the US. It can be fuel management on a landscape scale through prescribed burnings or thinning or mechanical thinning or grazing like in Catalonia. And it can also be at a governance and policy level, like through one nationally responsible agency with a 10-year plan aimed at fire prevention rather than response alone. So this is also a matter of investment. And so to summarize, of course, wildfires and their risks can vary in different places, but there is so much knowledge in different places already. And so now it is on us to learn from that and take the initiative to reduce the wildfire disaster risk. Thank you very much for your attention.
Ms. Pandey, Ms. Kirchner, Pooja, and Judith, thank you very, very much for the presentation of PyroLife. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends following us from over the web, we do not present educational and training projects just because we have to or because we want to fill up the agenda. Exactly the opposite, because both of us here at CERIDES and at the University of Haifa, we are universitarian academic institutions. We firmly believe and we support the education and training component of research. And research like the one presented to us just now by our PhD candidates within this ITN project is where the forefront of basic research, if you will, in our educational activities happens. And of course, the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions program of the European Commission is one of the best such funding mechanisms. And this is why we present and we highlight projects like PyroLife. So Pooja and Judith, thank you once again. Now we will move on to showcase, to highlight yet another lessons learned activity, which underlines what we boasted before, what Professor Boustras and Her Excellency the Deputy Ambassador boasted before, that this is a long-standing collaboration, both at country level and at institutional level between the European University Cyprus, CERIDES, and the University of Haifa and Mohanut. Because we will go back, and I invite you all to follow the 2010 Mount Carmel fire, and we will indeed have a presentation on the lessons learned and the recommendations by our dear collaborator, Professor Lea Wittenberg from the University of Haifa and from Mohanut. So, Professor Wittenberg, please, the electronic podium is yours. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm trying to share the my presentation. Do you see it now? Because I cannot see it.
We're in the presentation and we see you as well.
You see me as well and the presentation as well?
Yes, you should perhaps please share it in presentation mode because we also see the slides on the left-hand side.
Yeah, okay, now you see the presentation mode?
Yes, but we also see the notes coming up.
Okay, so just a second, please. Because I have few screens, so it's always confuses which one to share. I guess I will try to share maybe this one. Now what you see also the notes?
No, now it's fine, perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay,
please, go ahead.
Good, great, thank you. Thank you for guiding me. So good afternoon and thank you for the invitation. I'm Lea Wittenberg from the University of Haifa, Department of Geography and Physical Geographer. I've been working on wildfire for almost 30 years now. And I will talk about the 2010 fire and some of the lessons that we learned after it. Okay, So wildfires, even though I don't think I need to show this slide, following all the very interesting presentation we had till now, is wildfire in the Mediterranean have profound environmental and economic and social, as well as geomorphological and ecological impacts at multiple geographical scales. And future scenarios point out that the increase of burnt areas and the rise in the activity of the fire is expected due to the multiple interacting forces and drivers such as climate change, land use, and direct human impact by ignition and suppression. This picture that we see here is not from Mount Carmel in 2010, rather it is from the Jerusalem mountain burned in August. Usually my research is focused on fire effects on soil, vegetation, and more recently on ecosystem services and other effects of fire on human and landscape interactions. Just a brief presentation of Mount Carmel, an overview of the region. Mount Carmel is a distinctive mountain ridge in northwestern Israel. It covers an area of about 250 square kilometers, highest peak at about 550 meters above sea level. The climate is typical Mediterranean. This means hot and very dry summers, and in the last year, very shrinking winters, with about 680, 700 millimeters per year. Vegetation is typical Mediterranean maquis, comprised mainly of Pinus halepensis, which is very flammable pine, oak trees, and other native association. This picture was taken during the first day of the 2010 fire. You can see here the city of Haifa and Haifa Bay, and the Mount Carmel just on top of the city. But the landscape looked very differently about 100 years ago. So large fires are relatively new in the recent history of the region, and primarily due to the lack of vegetation and lack of forest and expedition and visitors that visited the area in the 19th century and the 18th century actually described that most of the land was denuded of vegetation, and very massive afforestation efforts that began with the British mandatory government and later by the Jewish National Fund, KKL, entirely changed the landscape. And these pictures was taken just before the 2010 fire, so you can see the pine forest, but you can also see the scars of previous fire that affected the area. You don't see my arrow. Do you see my arrow? Okay, but nevertheless, the scars that are very prominent in the landscape are the residues of previous fire and the pine trees that will burned in the 2010 fire. The Mount Carmel famous December 2010 fire actually started on the morning of December 2nd and spread very rapidly. This is the area of the fire, the basin of Nahal Oren that was almost entirely burned. The fire covered and consumed about 2,500 hectares of natural vegetation and planted forest. They claimed the lives of 44 people and actually forced evacuation of more than 17,000 people from nearby communities. The fire was the largest and the most deadliest and costliest forest fire in Israel history. Fighting the fire was actually exacerbated by hot and dry weather, combined with the local flammable vegetation. So Israel had to request international support to fight the fire, to fight this massive fire. And eventually, a total of 24 countries sent firefighting aircraft and firefighters and equipment to assist Israel in extinguishing the fire, which actually was consumed about 3 days later, or about 80 hours later. But the weather condition during the fire and during the 2 weeks before the fire were exceptional for both the region and the season. The temperature was higher than the average. With the blue dotted line, I mark the average temperature. For December in Mount Carmel is about between 13 and 16 centigrades. Temperature was much higher. But most importantly, the relative humidity was very, very, very low. It was lower than 20%. And again, the average relative humidity for the region and for the season is between 50 to 80%. So the conditions before the fire and during the fire were extremely dry and extremely exceptional for the season. Coupled with strong easterly wind, the weather condition actually facilitated a very massive and intense and severe fire. And in a paper we published a few years later, we actually tried to calculate the relationship between the fire area and the length of the dry period, and we found this correlation between the perimeter of the fire and the number of days since the last rain. This point, of course, is the unique fire of 2010, which was very different in its size and the length of the dry season. The fire, as I mentioned, spread very, very rapidly. It started, the first signs of the fire were noted by an airplane that crossed the land. It was about 11 in the morning, and then about 2 or 3 or 4 hours later, it spread all over the mountain. You see the fire in the middle of the picture. It was just 25 past 14. And there is a large valley that most of it is agriculture land, point A and B, just across this valley in the midst of the mountain. So the fire actually jumped about 750 meters in a few minutes. So at 3 o'clock, the fire jumped or moved from the point that we saw in the previous picture to this point, and then jumped and crossed the valley with spot and amber attacks. And within minutes, you can see here the map and the valley with the agricultural land, point A, point B, point C. And within minutes, the fire just jumped to point C, 1514, and then in 5 minutes just explode. So it was really a very massive and intense fire, and very, very, very different to the events we knew before. Tens of aircraft and helicopters dropped fire retardant and water from the air. But regardless, all the effort, all the massive effort to consume the fire, there is a very high correlation between the time that the fire was declared to be consumed and the timing of the shift in the weather condition. So notwithstanding the super tanker and the tons of cubic meters of water that were dropped from the sky, the fire actually stopped or consumed in relation with change in the weather. So the rapid shift of wind direction that you can see here between 11 and 12, the wind direction changed from easterly to westerly wind, and the relative humidity jumped from 20 to 80%. And in the following day, the rainfall came. So actually, it is believed, or we believe, that the fire stopped not because all of the massive effort to consume it, but rather it stopped because of the change in the weather condition, which is very prominent in this graph. And Another point that we noticed during the fire was the natural decay of the fire. Again, regardless of all the forces and the extinguishing and the firefighting efforts. So the fire actually stopped naturally or decayed naturally along the borders of previous fires. It means that fires that were burnt in past fires, later I will show the year lapse between the events, but when the fire reached the border of a scar of previous fire, it stopped because the fuel load in these patches is very low or limited. And it, of course, depends on the time of the period of the time that elapsed from the previous fire. So in a special report that we produced after the fire for the Haifa District Attorney Office, we used far site simulation coupled with field evidence and satellite imagery. And we try to evaluate the intensity of the fire and the behavior of the fire and the ability of the forces to control it in relation to the intensity and the energy that was actually produced by the fire itself. So this is the map that shows the severity of the fire and the groups of vegetation. So you can see that most of the fire, almost 60% or above 60% of the burnt area was burnt by a high severity fire. And most of the land that was burned in high severity fire was composed of pine trees. So there is a very prominent correlation between the type of the vegetation and the severity of the fire. Again, flammable pines actually led to a very intense fire. The far side simulation, oh, sorry, it's Hebrew. Made a mistake here. The far side simulation is a computer simulation that model fire behavior and including surface fire or ground fire spotting, etc. We use basic or information from the Israel Meteorological Institute, and we use a DEM with a resolution of 25 meters. So we looked at the topography, at the slope, at the length of the slopes, and again, temperature, minimum temperature, maximum temperature, relative humidity, wind speed, and the amount of ground bulk density, which was 0.4 kilogram per square meters. And we compare our result of the model to the information available on the limitation of fire suppression limitation, which is an index that is based on the maximum flame height, for example here, and the maximum flame length. And of course, we have to keep in mind that the vegetation is a conifer forest, which produces a very intense fire. And the result of our simulation indicated most of the fire was classified into two dominant categories: flames higher than 3.3 meters and flames lower than 1.3 meter. So in this simulation, the maximum flame height exceeded 15 meters. So according to this scenario, in many places, the fire could not be extinguished at all, regardless of all the available extinguishing equipment. Yeah, I go back to this table, and it is clearly shown that when the maximum flame height exceeds 15 meters, ground fire in low forest fire type spotting occurs, and it is control effort at the head of the fire is ineffective. So we could clearly model the fire itself. I mean, this is one picture of the fire that clearly showed that the length height is much more than 15 meters, taking into consideration that the height of the tree is about 30 meters. So you can see, you can imagine the intensity of this fire. This is again the flame length in relation to the height of the houses here in the Kibbutz Beton. It is also evident that there is a very massive spotting and new spots of fire just because of flying cones and flying ambers, etc. So this was the fire, and just even before the fire stopped, the Ministry of Environmental Protection, in cooperation with the Ministry of Agriculture and the Ministry of Finance, and the Jewish National Fund and the Israel Nature and Park authorities formed an expert, a committee of experts, including people from the academia, from several disciplines. And the committee goals was twofold. The first one was to bring together existing knowledge to basically articulate practical recommendations to immediate start to maintain public safety within the wood, and also formulate instruction to rehabilitate the region, vegetation, and soil. So this was one goal, and the other goal was to develop a new and long-term management agenda aimed at preventing large fires in the region and minimize the damages of future events. The main recommendation of the committee are as follows. There is a tendency to provide the best condition for natural rehabilitation, but because of the flammability of the pine, there was an instruction to reduce the density of the pine forest, but preserve the local natural population of the Eastern European subgroup, which is genetically distinct. And also there was instruction about the desired landscape, a variety of patches provide within the field different patches of open land and forest and mixed patches. Landscaping development of the communities in the fire-prone areas, and the establishment of buffer zones between the landscape units and around the settlement. There was another recommendation regarding the importance of goat herding in the buffer zone, just to keep the buffer zone open and for maintenance purposes. This is a very controversial issue here in the region. Nevertheless, we had our own insight from the fire that I want to share with you now. And I think that the first and foremost lesson is that the main problem is not the fire, or I mean, it is the fire, but it's not the lack of professional and scientific knowledge, because basically the committee went back to the recommendation that were published following the 1989 fire. There was hardly anything new in the recommendation of the committee. So the basic problem is the lack of, I think, integration and assimilation and implementation of previous research and recommendation locally and from other countries in the Mediterranean, because the amount of data that exists is huge. But again, after every fire, it seemed that we invent the wheel from the beginning. For example, there was this fire in the Judean mountain in August, and again, a new committee and a new expert that sit down and think how to mitigate and prevent and manage the land. So I think that my first lesson is the problem of the lack of assimilation and implementation of previous knowledge. And this, of course, requires a better cooperation between all the institution, the academia, governmental agencies, policymakers, land managers, and of course, the local community to better integrate between the data and the information and the relevance of all the rules and instructions. And another thing that we learned, that the spread of large fires is a result of two types of dynamics, a contiguous spread and spotting. This discontinuous fire spread due to spotting is not very well understood, and it's very difficult to model. It's very unpredictable, and it causes major damage, and actually it makes the fire run to directions that are very hard or difficult to follow during the event itself. And this spotting hazard is more complex and more dangerous in the wildland-urban interfaces, and which is, I think, a new direction that needs special attention in future analysis of wildfires. And the last thing is the importance of the mapping and the analysis of the land, because we saw, as I mentioned earlier, that the fire was naturally decayed in previously burned sites. So given the high intensity of the fire and the inability to control it according or because or due to its intensity, this information or mapping of past fire is crucial to better predict fire spread and behavior during the event and management strategies after the event. And in general, the fuel load mapping approach is essential for the integrated fire management. Planning and implementation of prescribed burning is another point, and it is widely accepted and known that fire have been historically used as a management tool for opening the forest or producing a livestock open area. But today, however, at least in Israel, no agency is willing to take the risk of conducting prescribed fire because of the density of the population, but this is one of the best means to reduce the fuel load in the forest. Thank you very much.
So Professor Wittenberg, thank you also very much for your kind contribution. It is Mount Carmel is yet another showcase, at least for us operationals, that we have to remind ourselves to keep modest and humble when it comes to discussing our capabilities of forest firefighting efforts. And Mount Carmel showed this, that no matter how much we put into it in terms of instrumentation, of equipment, and of course of human resources power, we still have to keep modest. But also another major lesson learned, as I understand it, goes towards the academic community, but also the policy-making community, that we should try to assimilate, to integrate more the lessons learned so that we don't suffer from the so-called paradigm blindness in disaster management. So thanks again, Professor Wittenberg, for your contribution. Moving on now to our hashtag DPM 2021 first day, I would like to very warmly invite again one of our own at the European University Cyprus and CERIDES, who will talk to us about large-scale civil protection exercises. So with great pleasure, Mr. Evangelos Katsaros, please, the actual floor is yours.
Antonio, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here and participating in this event. My presentation will be about large-scale civil protection exercises, which are the closest we have to actual emergencies in order to test procedures, plans, cooperation, technologies, and all these elements, lessons learned, of course, all these elements that were mentioned by the previous speakers. At the moment, we are proudly coordinating 3 pan-European DG ECO exercises, the projects Balance, PDX, and HOPE. And the Balance has started last year, and it is about managing an earthquake, a large-scale earthquake in Montenegro, in the Kotor Bay area. And 1st of December, we started another project, a historical one, as George Boustras better says than me, that an exercise in Jordan, Israel, Palestine region about managing earthquake that is a contribution of us and of our colleagues to the efforts for the cooperation there. And another one project, HOPE, that will start in 1st of January next year. It is HOPE. It is about managing an earthquake in Yerevan in Armenia, in South Caucasus area that is, as you know, it faces a lot of problems, and civil protection initiatives came to establish regional cooperation and try to to optimize the procedure for managing emergencies. Let me start with Balance project that is ongoing already for a year now. Balance is trying to connect past events with future events. I mean, the project originated because in 1979 a big earthquake struck the area of Kotor Bay in Montenegro, creating many problems, dead people, injured people, a lot of infrastructures were destroyed, and of course, all the efforts of small countries like Montenegro, then it was part of Yugoslavian Republic, of course, but now it's a small country that cannot afford losing development opportunities in the future. So lessons learned from past earthquakes and from other past events are used in order to be prepared for the project, for the disasters of the future, if they may come. As you can see in the pictures, in the right hand, it's the Kotor Bay is a place with, it depends very much on tourism, a lot of visitors, especially in the summer. We have a lot of cultural heritage monuments, many infrastructures that have to be protected. What are the partners? The partners, European University Cyprus, Ministry of Interior of Montenegro, the Institute of Seismology and Meteorology in Montenegro, a company for the dissemination, again from Montenegro, the Ministry of Interior of Croatia, the Civil Defense from Cyprus, the General Secretariat of Civil Protection in Greece, Province of Potenza in Italy, Alpha Unmanned Vehicles in Spain, Sofia Municipality in Bulgaria, Lesha Region, and Institute for Democratization in Albania. As you can see, it's a big consortium for such projects because we wanted to have a balance between operational partners, research and academic partners and companies, so that everybody contributes its share in order to optimize the management of big events like the earthquakes. To give you an example, partner number 8, Province of Potenza, is an ambassador of United Nations Initiative for Cities Resilience of the Cities. So very important for the future. So we are trying to combine different initiatives, results and outputs from different projects in order to optimize balanced projects and optimize the actual procedures for managing emergencies. As you can see, we have the epicenter in Kotor Bay. A big area is affected. There is the cross-border dimension both with Croatia and Albania, the neighboring countries. And we aim for a very challenging project. What is the main aim of the project is to improve the civil protection preparedness and response capabilities of Montenegro in dealing with large disasters. As I mentioned before, especially small countries cannot afford to fail in disaster management because disasters affect the development of their countries much more seriously than in larger countries. And also, we are trying to establish cooperation in the area of Western Balkans. It's an area where the countries are, let's say, waiting for the invitation to join the European Union, with the exception of Croatia that is already a member. So we are trying to strengthen the cooperation bonds and trying to familiarize all these countries with the civil protection mechanism and the procedures they must follow. Specific objectives. As you can see, and you will see more on the other projects, the full-scale exercise projects are not only for the exercise. This is the major event, the main event of the project, but it's not the only one. We have a lot of training activities, we have a lot of planning conferences, we have tabletop exercises, command post exercises before the field scale exercise, which means that all the lessons learned from the past can be used in order to optimize the scenario, to make the scenario more challenging, to see what went wrong in the past, what things we have to avoid, what are the best practices that we have to adopt. This is very important. Therefore, you have at least 1.5 years or 2 years in these projects in order to work towards the full-scale exercise. And after the full-scale exercise, you have the opportunity to capitalize on the results, to mainstream them even before the end of the projects, both at operational level, civil protection units, first responders, to optimize their procedures, their plans, to train better their personnel, but also the regional and national governments to create new policies that will create a framework helping management and prevention of disasters. So a lot of objectives. To give you a few examples, we are trying to test the existing standard operating procedures for emergency response, especially cross-border standard operating procedures in an area in Western Balkans where we have countries both within and outside the Union civil protection mechanism. We're trying to protect critical infrastructures, but also including cultural heritage monuments. In Kotorska Bay, a lot of cultural heritage monuments are very important because they create wealth, they attract tourists in a large scale that boost the economy of Montenegro, but also because Montenegrins are proud of them, and these monuments give Montenegrins the identity they have. So very important issue. Another important issue is also how you deal in emergencies with people with disabilities, disabled people. There is a big gap in this field, and we are trying also to address that. How different intervention teams, first responders from different countries inside and outside the mechanism cooperate together in a large-scale event. It's the closest, the simulation exercises are the closest we have to actual disasters, so it's an opportunity to test this cooperation between intervention teams from different countries, from different cultures, within and outside the mechanism of European Union. And also, we have to understand the host nation support guidelines, which means that how a country is prepared to host the international support in case of an emergency. And in the case especially of Western Balkans, that we have small countries, we consider also the possibility that one neighboring country is hosting and welcoming, let's say, the international assistance in order to support the country that is hidden in the area. For example, in case of a big earthquake in Montenegro, critical infrastructures like airports, like ports of neighboring country Croatia should be used in order to welcome the international assistance and forward it to Montenegro. So a lot of objectives. I would like to mention also that, as you may saw in the consortium, we have also some scientific partners, because we would like to strengthen the cooperation between operational authorities and academic and scientific partners. For example, how the early warning system for an earthquake is built in order to inform citizens and authorities as much as possible for an earthquake. We have few minutes before an earthquake strikes that we can inform the national authorities, for example, and then stop the flow of natural gas in the network. There are a lot of examples that the cooperation of operational authorities and scientific authorities can produce great results for the safety and the security of citizens. The second project is PDX, which was originating from the professional dialogue initiative that is ongoing the last few years in the area. And the partners are European University Cyprus, Cyprus Civil Defense. We have been honored also with the participation of Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Cyprus. And then we have some partners from Austria and Germany that have worked in the professional dialogue, and they have worked with the local partners the last few years and know the local special characteristics very well, and they can contribute the maximum to the success of this project. Again, the aim is to strengthen the disaster preparedness in the Jordan, Israel, Palestine region, to increase the interoperability of the different systems, to enable the host nation support guidelines and the cooperation for international disaster response. As you can understand, also in this region applies the rule that maybe the earthquake may hit one country, and then we have to send the international assistance to a neighboring country to host it there and then forward it to the hit area. So the cooperation is very important, and we have, when we're thinking of optimizing the civil protection systems, we can not only focus in one country, in one specific area, but we have to optimize the regional civil protection system. And the objectives are very few and very clear in this project: to produce an in-depth analysis of the civil protection situation in the region, to hold the joint planning with Jordan, Israel, Palestine partners, to develop the joint standard operating procedures for international disaster response, including host nation support, and of course, to prepare and conduct the tabletop and full-scale exercises. And last but not least, we will have a major conference here in Cyprus in order to evaluate the situations, to, let's say, announce the lessons learned and what will be the next steps in capitalizing and mainstreaming the project results. And the last project is HOPE. As you can see, it will be implemented in South Caucasus area, in Armenia, and also in Georgia, where the partners are European University Cyprus and the Geological Institute of France, BRGM, and then we have six national authorities from Europe and in Armenia, the Ministry of Emergencies of Armenia, the Cyprus Civil Defense, the Ministry of Interior of France, the General Secretariat of Civil Protection in Greece, the Ministry of Interior of Montenegro, and the Protection and Rescue Directorate of North Macedonia that trusted us, and we created this very strong consortium in order to test the capabilities for managing an earthquake in a very difficult and challenging environment as the one in Yerevan in Armenia. Armenia, as you know, is a landlocked country. Their borders are closed for political reasons with Turkey and with Azerbaijan. So the cross-border corridor with Georgia is very important in case of a big disaster. And we have, as you know, the Spitak earthquake in 1983 with decades, thousands of dead people, and a big disaster near Yerevan. It is very important also here in HOPE project that we have the official participation of INSARAG from Geneva, because Armenia, you know, it's in between Europe and let's say Asia. So we have to try to combine and find compatibility between the different systems, the mechanism of rescue in European Union, and INSARAG specifications followed also in countries outside the European Union. So very important project. Again, we will have a major disaster in Yerevan, a complex disaster, which means that we will have an earthquake, but then we will have some cascading effects. Some old dams may fail, and we have some floods. it will be a big, we will simulate a big disaster. The Armenian government is thinking also to test and simulate transferring of governmental functionalities to Gyumri, to the second biggest city in Armenia. So it will be actually a very big exercise there in a very challenging environment. And we will test, of course, the cross-border cooperation with Georgia in an area that road connections, rail connections, air connections are not very well. So it takes many hours to support the hit, and many days to support the hit country. Again, the hope is not just a full-scale exercise, however big it is a full 2 years project that we will have to make study visits, to understand the situation there, to demonstrate technologies that are coming from other projects, Horizon projects, to see training activities, and also to try to activate all the agreements, some existing, some will be implemented during the projects with neighboring countries or with cross-border countries that will support Armenia and Georgia in case of an emergency. It is very important to say that also the Georgian government is participating through the National Civil Protection Authority. And even though they are not partners officially, because they had some technical problems, they will fully participate and the expenses will be paid by the project. In that sense, we will organize 2 events and small-scale exercises for specific scenario elements in Tbilisi, in the capital of Georgia. And we will have full operational teams, full synthesis and full-scale operational teams participating to the exercise coming from Georgia to Yerevan, as simulating what will happen in reality if an earthquake hits the area of Yerevan. And both governments have, let's say, committed themselves to capitalize on the results of HOPE projects. And indeed, there is an agreement between the 2 countries that has to reconsider and reactivate it again. So thank you for your attention. Let me close my presentation saying that simulation exercises are very important because it is the closest we have to disasters in order to test plans, procedures, interoperability, technologies, everything that makes a successful or not successful management of an emergency. So we will keep you updated on the results, and we will be very glad if any of you would like, any of your entities would like to be informed about these exercises or to have, let's say, to send observers in the exercises. We will be very glad to cooperate with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vangelis. Thank you, Mr. Katsaros. Indeed, your closing remark has underlined the importance of large-scale exercises and simulation exercises. Allow me, as we like to say in the operational world, the more ink and sweat we shed during the design and conducting of large-scale exercises, the less tears and blood shed during the actual combating of large-scale disaster emergency events. So, very important contribution, Vangelis, Mr. Katsaros, regarding large-scale civil protection exercises. Moving forward to our hashtag DPM 2021 first day, we would like to invite again one of our collaborators from the University of Haifa and the National Knowledge and Research Center for Emergency Response, Emergency Readiness, I apologize. This time it will be Dr. Alex Althuller, who will present to us the science policy interface in emergency management and DRR, disaster risk reduction. And indeed, Dr. Althuller will present to us both the challenges and potential solutions. Dr. Althuller, please, the e-podium is yours.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me well?
Indeed, loud and clear.
Yes?
Yes?
Yes? Can you hear me well? Okay. So thank you so much. I'm delighted to share with you some of my thoughts and insights, and the timing of the presentation is indeed perfect. As Vangelis said, the issue of cooperation is of huge importance, and those critical issues of regional cooperation among the practitioners and researchers are of huge importance, and I would of course also be personally interested in contributing my modest contribution to that, to building those bridges as Vangelis suggested. So I would like to share with you some of my insights, and I think the main theme of most of the presentations that we heard until now was various ways of building bridges between country stakeholders. We also heard about the symbolic day that today the tripartite meeting is taking place, but I think it is much beyond that. The issue of building bridges is of huge importance, and I think the ongoing COVID-19 crisis stressed this over and over again. So I would like to contribute my modest part to this huge challenge. I think in general, when we speak about research practice synergy or science policy interface, I think we could distinguish in Europe and on the global scale between proactive approach and reactive approach. Some countries take clearly proactive, broad approach to tackling those issues and trying to continuously, proactively foster engagement between practitioners and researchers, and other countries act on a more ad hoc and reactive basis. And I think we could clearly see from international comparison that proactive approach is much more effective and important. So this is a small investment that could bring much more substantial and sustainable results. Another point that I would like to share with you and to stress, I think there is a huge need of joint coping of researchers and practitioners with uncertainty. Sometimes we speak about deep uncertainty when we experience currently the COVID-19 global crisis. My esteemed colleague and friend Shai Ben Yosef unfortunately couldn't be with us today, and we send him and his family our best wishes. Unfortunately, he couldn't join us, and he was, of course, an important part of this agenda. For today, he always uses the term of navigating complexity. And I think it is very, very, very important here. The world becomes increasingly more and more complex and more uncertain. And, perhaps a few years ago, one could say that current COVID-19 crisis is kind of extreme, or as some medical professionals said, almost unbelievable crisis, but we live it now for almost 2 years. And I think navigating complexity and coping with uncertainty is of huge importance. It could be done separately. Researchers could cope separately and practitioners, but I think to do it jointly would have much more sustainable societal impact, and it will, of course, enrich also the two worlds, the research world and the practical world.
Dr. Althuller, I'm sorry to interrupt
Yes.
you. I am receiving
Yes,
from the back office, from the support office, we are not seeing any slides. Is that correct, or
Yes,
you are sharing something?
Is that is completely correct. Yes,
Okay.
yes. So my conversation is without slides. So yeah.
Okay,
yeah,
so
it
it's
is
a discourse,
completely
all right.
correct. No.
I apologize
No
for the
technical
interruption
issues.
and apologize to our friends following us from the from live. So please, the floor is again yours.
No. On the contrary, I thank you so much for collegiality and for everything. So yes, it is completely fine. The other thing that I would like to mention, and it was further stressed in some of the research reports, I think there is an urgent need, further highlighted by the COVID-19 pandemic, for more efforts in research as well as in implementation for DRR projects. So I think we heard about some of the important projects from our CERIDES colleagues, and those programs bring important fruits, important results, and the number of those collaborative projects should be definitely increased in routine time and especially in emergency times. I would like also further stress the importance of transdisciplinary science and transdisciplinary implementation, because working in silos is many times very convenient. We are in our comfort zones, but at the same time, the public suffers very much when we are working in silos. So I think transdisciplinary science and transdisciplinary implementation is quite an imperative. The fifth point that I would like, and at the end of my conversation, I would, of course, repeat the main points. The fifth point that I would like to share with you is the need, in my modest opinion, for continuous research, practice, exchange, and involvement throughout the whole research cycle. I think it is very important that we will not look at the practitioners as just, customers of research results. If we work together, we should work together from the beginning, from the start, from the basic research questions that if we work together, we should make sure that they are important for both practitioners and researchers. And then throughout the whole cycle, we should work together. This is, in my opinion, the best way to achieve effective results, but not only. It is also the best way to increase the chances that the research results would be actually implemented, because practitioners work together with us, raise their concerns, raise their criticism, and also provide their input throughout the whole process, and not only received long or not so long research report with certain summaries that provide only the end point and not involve them in a major way. Another thing that I would like to share with you, and I think both Professor Bustras and Professor Shmueli, and actually I think to some extent all the presenters shared, I think beyond the content of what should be done to build those bridges and what should be done to improve the quality of both science and practice, I think it is very important that we would keep and foster as much as we can the spirit of solidarity, friendship, and collegiality. I think it has enormous importance, and such unprecedented events as the current COVID-19 pandemic further stress it. Regarding the international cooperation, I think it's very important to stress Horizon Europe and other European binational and multinational mechanisms. Those vehicles actually serve as enhancers and as important incentives for cooperation. I think we should also think together how could we make all those mechanisms that are funded by national agencies, international agencies, or private donors more and more accessible to firefighter in Nicosia, or to medical doctor in Amman, or to engineer in Yerevan, and of course to the scientists from all the discipline. The issue of accessibility is of huge importance, and I think we should make more and more efforts in this direction. I think the very important theme that is increasingly raised related to importance of technology and exact sciences. We could see throughout the COVID-19 crisis that technology has an important role in overcoming various barriers. It implies a huge potential to make societal progress and more. At the same time, I think we should also stress very much the importance of social sciences, and I think this point is not stressed enough. Social sciences are extremely important for understanding social drivers and effects of disaster risk reduction. I think the collaboration between social scientists, computer scientists, and other colleagues in exact scientists, as is done both in CERIDES and in Haifa and in other places, is a very important endeavor. Again, as cooperation between scientists and practitioners, it requires us to leave, to some extent, our comfort zones, to think, to engage with people who imply a bit different methodologies, who write in a bit different way, who pose perhaps a bit different questions. But I think overall scientific good and overall societal good clearly requires that, and actually this is the only way to create meaningful and transdisciplinary solutions for the society as a whole, and to tackle wicked problems as we currently see. I think it's also very important to acknowledge and maybe even stress the challenges that we experience. So I used here some examples and spoke with you about some insights, what I think should be further enhanced and what vehicles of building bridges could work and could help us. I think at the same time, we should be sincere with ourselves and acknowledge the challenges, the enormous challenges that we experience towards achieving such a vision. I think this is also a very important part of acknowledging the challenges, because otherwise we could be a little bit unrealistic. So I think in practice there is a big challenge of or very challenging combination of fundamental differences on the one hand, and at the same time joint missions of research and practice worlds. The incentives for the research community is fundamentally different than the incentives for practitioners. The structures, the organizational structures operate quite differently. Also, we don't operate in vacuum situations. Each country has its own history and culture and traditions and unique challenges and barriers. So I think the society wants us, all of us, to work together and achieve important holistic results, but at the same time, many issues divide us. Many issues intrinsically, organizationally, or culturally divide us, not only between countries, but also inside countries. The incentive for firefighter is very much different from the incentive for lecturer in academia or an official in a certain public ministry. And I think a sincere conversation about how could joint incentives be created and how could those barriers overcome, this conversation is of huge importance, because again, acknowledging the differences, I think it is a very, very important stage towards more effective building of bridges, as all of us strive and act and do it in so interesting and fascinating ways, as we have seen in certain presentations until now, and of course we could see it in many other projects that are not presented here. I would like at the end share with you a certain example that was carried out throughout the last year by the National Knowledge and Research Center in Emergency Management. So the center, as Deborah briefly mentioned in the beginning of this session in her presentation, the center has had an important role, not only as a distinct research facility, as a distinct research structure, but also as a national integrator for dozens of studies that were selected and commissioned by Israel Ministry of Innovation, Science and Technology, that actually touched upon educational, technological, medical, social, and much more issues. The regular, yes, like the more kind of natural, in the brackets, way of working is working in a kind of isolated way, that each research team works separately, reports to whatever funding agency, and at the end reports about research results. Here, I think with in a joint collaboration of the center headed by Deborah and the Israel Ministry of Innovation, Science and Technology, was created a very fruitful, although challenging model of actually collecting research insights every 2 weeks and sharing them with the relevant government structures, and also in fostering and enhancing dialogue through a series of webinars. The results are all couldn't be 100%, and I think we have also many lessons learned and many things that perhaps we should think about them differently. But I think a fundamental achievement was achieved, a really fundamental, substantial achievement. I think the last year showed us in Israel that researchers could cooperate among them for a continuous period of time quite effectively, and they also can work in a collaborative way with various government bodies. And I think this continuous sharing of knowledge is of huge importance. It allows me to speak about cautious optimism that could be shared locally and also perhaps regionally, internationally. A huge work is before us. Huge work, and the road is hopefully very long, but as we know, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step, and I think much more than a single step has been done by Deborah and her team, and really dozens of research teams across the country, and we could, of course, gladly research the challenges, the obstacles, and some achievements with our colleagues in CERIDES and beyond. I would like to conclude with mentioning some of the highlights of my hesitations, insights, and hopefully some takeaways. So I think the research cooperation and the research practice synergy is quite an imperative. I think it is also almost beyond argument. The huge challenge is how to do it and how to make it more sustainable, how to foster proactive approach. I think the experience both in CERIDES and at the center in Haifa may be a basis for cautious optimism, and of course we could and should work much more together on those huge challenges of national, regional, and international importance. With your permission, I have 3 takeaway messages. And those 3 takeaway messages are partnerships, partnerships, and partnerships. I think those issues of partnerships are of huge importance, and they are a very important element of providing effective solution. I would like to also express my deep gratitude to my friend and colleague, Professor George Boustros, for initiating and organizing this important event, and of course, for the whole excellent CERIDES team. And of course, to my friend and colleague, Professor Deborah Shmueli, for coordinating the Israeli team or Israeli side of this important event, and for all her tremendous work in fostering research practice integration. I would like to thank you very much for listening to my observation, and looking forward very much to cooperating with you more and more. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Althuller. It is an easy synopsis that you have provided to us. Your key message is indeed partnerships, partnerships, partnerships. We couldn't agree more. We have long-standing cooperation anyway. But indeed, the key message from your very interesting presentation was the collegiality and collaboration. Collegiality and collaboration in the research practice, but of course encompassing also the practitioners in the field with the point and the strive to have uptake of such collaboration by the policymakers as well, so that indeed the research practice encompasses the first responders and the practitioners, and then the policymakers uptake and take it further. Indeed, our last presentation is again for first responders, and in fact for new technologies for first responders. It is the project Respond A, and this will be presented by the director of the Center of Excellence in Risk and Decision Sciences at the European University Cyprus, of course by Professor George Boustras. Professor Boustras, the electronic floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Catalonia. I didn't hear the latest part, but I guess you can hear me. Okay, so let me try to upload my presentation. And before I start, Before I start, I would like to say a couple of words as we're drawing to a close. First thing, what a better way to start my presentation after a presentation that my friend Alex Altschuler has just delivered. As always, to the point, despite his young age, always focused and always coming up with a great understanding and analysis. Thank you very much, Alex. And thank you very much for being instrumental to bringing us together with Mouhanout and bringing us together with the University of Haifa, because what the rest of the people don't know is that Alex was the catalyst in bringing us in contact, and not only having a scientific relationship, but having also a relationship between an institutional relationship that we look forward to expanding. Having said that, what I think, like surfaces more and more as we go on today is that the title of today's gathering was, I think, very, very focused in the sense that we are all looking at the possibilities that exist for collaboration in the area. And we look at it not only from projects that can happen in the future, but also by learning and analyzing experiences from the past. Leah, what perhaps you don't know is that the work that you have presented from Mount Carmel has been very much discussed here in Cyprus in the recent fires, as well as in the fires in the Troodos Mountain back in 2016. And although I don't know if this was documented in global literature or scientific literature, the relationship of the reports that were commissioned after the fire in 2016, they follow very closely to the results and the lessons learned after the Mount Carmel fire. So I was very, very grateful to listen to what you have said. I hope that we're going to have more opportunities to do that. Unfortunately, COVID limits, puts a limit, like in so many things that we would like to do. Exchange of students, exchange of staff and all that. But we hope that things are going to get better very soon and we're going to be in a better position. Now, I'm not going to take any of your time because I'm the last person before you have the end of your day. So let me go very quickly to what I'm here to present today. And what I would like to do is, we have spoken a lot about infrastructure, we have spoken a lot about forests, about community involvement, and so many things that make up resilience and resilience planning, resilience and disaster management. I would like to present the work that is currently happening at Respond Day. Respond Day is a project which is funded by the European Union,
Professor
by
Boustras,
the European Commission, actually,
Professor Boustras,
under
if I can
Horizon
interrupt you,
2020,
please share
under the
your
DRS 2020 call, and it focuses on the provision of new technologies, brand new technologies that can assist first responders. As you see in the pictures that I chose, they're very dramatic, I think, but what you see is what happened, what took place last summer here in Cyprus and in Greece as well. And the presence of Israel and the support of the state of Israel was greatly acknowledged by everyone already. What we see is more prolonged fire seasons, a lot of heat stress for our firefighters, and the need for brand new mechanisms, the need for brand new technologies that will be able to assist our first responders. That's one part. But at the same time also to help, let's say, the back office, the control and command center, to optimize the use of human and non-human elements in the firefighting effort. So we're looking at, Respond A is looking at developing brand new technologies that are going to help with early assessment, safety assessment of the first responders. It is going to provide them with risk mitigation capabilities because they will have a much better outlook of what is happening around. And of course, it is going to give to the command and control center a very clear operational picture, whereas at the same time, it will be much easier to optimize the use, not only of teams, but of each individual person. So we will minimize exposure to risks and not only exposures to fire per se, but also to exhaustion and various other problems that may occur. What are we doing in Respond Day? In Respond Day, we are trying to make use of modern technologies like 5G. Although there is a lot of word around about 5G, the reality is that 5G has not been implemented yet in a large scale. And it is true also to say that the implementation of 5G technologies is going to give much better and much faster services, as well as speeds of transfer of data that we haven't had in the past. So we look forward, Respond A looks forward to capitalizing on that. And basically what, if I can, present it in layman's terms, what we're planning to do is we're trying to develop wearable technology that first responders are going to be able to use. They will include, of course, health sensors, that it is going to help both them and the command center to optimize their presence in the incident. Environmental sensors, that it is going to give an outlook of what is happening around in the vicinity, so you're going to have a much more accurate understanding of the vicinity, as well as emergency activated sensors, sensors that will be activated in cases that risk is really going towards a zone that it is going to be difficult to handle. I'm not going to pretend that I'm a computer engineer, so if there is one, you are most welcome to study the next slide. What I know, what I learned is to say, as the coordinator of the project, to say that this is the architecture of the development of the project, and it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 layers of development. One very important thing that I think this project is based upon is the fact that we do not only have the development of the new technology, at the same time we are trying to develop the technologies, which is, I think, which is self-evident there. But at the same time, we are trying to educate and train first responders, either professional first responders or volunteer first responders, in these brand new technologies. Later on, I will challenge our producer today by trying to show a film that will be from the second training that we conducted in Limassol recently. And training, as I said, is a very important part. We have already finished the second training. The first one was conducted in the midst of the second pandemic wave, and we had a lot of basically things happened online. Another aspect that is very important is the fact that we are going to test all these technologies in 3 pilots. There is one coming up very soon with a fire scenario in Cyprus. There is an earthquake scenario in Greece, and there is an SAR operation in Valencia, in the port of Valencia in Spain. We are preparing currently for the Cyprus the Cyprus case, which is going to be based on a scenario of fire and, of course, various infrastructures being part of this scenario. We plan to reduce the times for mobilizing. We try to get to know the limitations of these new technologies we're developing. And then we're going to move to Greece, and we're going to go for an earthquake scenario. Our technical manager is the National Scientific Center for Research, Demokritos, which is a pioneer in the development of 5G telecommunication solutions, and they will be conducting the second pilot there in Greece based on optimizing the use of 5G. As you know, earthquakes are a very challenging environment, so I don't need to say too much about that. Yes, and the third case, it will be the case that will take place in Valencia, and it will be, if I can say, a holistic approach. I'm informed as we speak that you cannot see the change of my slides, although I'm sure that I see that. I'm sorry about this. I don't know what I really need to do at the moment. Let me go back to normal operation and perhaps try to illustrate this from there. We had quite a few challenges in 2021. But we have more challenges coming up in 2022, and we have plans for rectifying all that. The main problem that we faced, I think it is not a problem that we faced in Cyprus, but it was a pan-European, a global issue, was that of COVID-19. So the fact that there was limitation in move of people as well as of transportation was a critical element, because don't forget that we are 34 partners, as you will see very soon. We are developing new technologies, and these new technologies need to be tested. That's the first part. And secondly, they need to be integrated close to each other. So there is a lot of work to be done there. I have to say something that perhaps it's going to sound very egoistic, but it is true. We were very careful in planning in between the breaks of the various waves of the pandemic, and we managed to have the second training in person in Limassol. Hopefully the video is going to work in a minute and you will see some parts of that. I would like to add another thing here. And the fact is that we have been lucky at this time to coordinate also a number of DG ECO exercises. And we plan, pandemic permitting, of course, we plan that we are going to use and we're going to test these brand new technologies in the DG ECO exercises under very, very normal and very, very harsh conditions. I wouldn't be right if I didn't talk about the partners of the project, 34 partners in the project, large industries, first responders, SMEs, research institutes and universities. I have to admit that in the beginning I was very scared of coordinating 34 different entities. So far, I think we are very close to halfway. I have to tell you that things have worked perfectly well. And fingers crossed. So I would like to express my gratitude to my colleagues there. Let me try to see now if this is going to work. It works. At least I can see it. Good morning from sunny Limassol. We're about to start training for the next 2 days in innovative technologies of Response A. Response A is a project funded by the European Union under the security pillar. And we're going to start training for the next 2 days, as I said, people from Cyprus, from the Civil Defense Force of the Republic of Cyprus, as well as volunteers that are following the training.
I think that this has been a very important step in the project, and we expect to have all the people together in Carmel 2022 in the next session, essentially in the gallery.
And well, I would like to thank you very much for listening to me in this presentation. I would like to thank you very much also for having a wonderful day that I think went as smoothly as possible, despite the technological challenges that we are facing in the era of COVID-19. And I'm passing the floor back to you.
Thank you, Professor Boustras, indeed for a very interesting presentation on Respond Day, on new technologies for first responders. Dear friends, ladies and gentlemen, those of you following us over the web, with the permission of Her Excellency, the Madam Deputy Ambassador, Mrs. Noga Kaspi, and of course with the permission of the Director of CERIDES, the Center of Excellence in Risk and Decision Sciences, Professor Boustras, I would like to close today's meeting. We have had a very fruitful and very engaged first day today of our Disaster Prevention Month, our hashtag DPM 2021. Today we dealt with regional collaboration in disaster prevention, and we have presented, we hope, successfully and thoroughly the cases of Cyprus and Israel, with representation from, respectively, the Center of Excellence in Risk and Decision Sciences from the European University Cyprus and the University of Haifa and the Mukhanut, so the National Knowledge and Research Center for Emergency Readiness. So with that, we would like to say ευχαριστούμε πολύ and toda rabba. And we would like to invite you tomorrow morning for our day 2, where we will have lessons learned from past disasters, and we will have our other close collaborators from Australia, so we will have perspectives from past disasters in Australia. Tomorrow morning at 9 Nicosia time, which would be 8 CET, so at 9 Nicosia time, we have the honor and privilege to welcome the Minister of Foreign Affairs, His Excellency Mr. Nikos Christodoulidis, and His Excellency the Australian High Commissioner in Cyprus, Mr. Sam Beaver. We thank you again all for your attending virtually today our hybrid meeting. We of course thank all of you who were physically present here today. And we renew our appointment for tomorrow morning at 9 Nicosia time for our day 2 of hashtag DPM 2021. Thank you all very much. A good afternoon and a good evening, depending on which time zone you're following us from.